I stared through the suffocating crimson mesh of my bridal veil, my eyes burning with the terror only an arranged marriage to a monster can give you. My heart hammered against my ribs with the kind of frantic rhythm only a nothing left to lose attitude provides. Oh, Sung Chul, I'm done. Done with being your collectible. Done with this transaction. When the lights suddenly plunged the ballroom into a violent, chaotic darkness, I didn't scream. I reached out. I seized the firm, elegant hand that found mine in the shadows with a triumphant, shaking grip, feeling like the baddest woman alive as I let a stranger pull me into the night. 6 years of swallowing my pride, 6 years of watching mediocre men treat my brilliance as a bargaining chip. I passed out in the back of the luxury vehicle, still wearing my ornate red wedding gown, feeling victorious for the first time since I arrived in Seoul. But when morning came, I discovered that my accidental abduction was about to turn into something I never could have imagined. Welcome to the heart of Seoul. We don't just tell stories, we explore the intensity of the human heart. Subscribe to stay connected. We're delivering regular doses of the unexpectable right here. I stared through the suffocating crimson mesh of my bridal veil, my eyes burning with a terror only an arranged marriage to a monster can give you. I stood there, a veiled mystery, in a room full of people who saw me as a transaction, waiting for the heavy hand of Oh Sung Chul to claim me for life. The ballroom was a theater of curated luxury, but beneath the ornate gold embroidery of my traditional gown, my heart hammered against my ribs with a frantic rhythm. Large display posters of the televised double wedding loomed behind us, broadcasting a destiny I never chose to an onlooking crowd of photographers and elite guests. 6 years of swallowing my pride had led to this moment of absolute despair. I could feel Sung Chul's predatory gaze even through the silk, a silent contract of ownership that made my skin crawl. He was a man who treated women as collectibles, and I was merely the latest piece in his possessive cage. Beside me sat another veiled bride, equally still, as the two men, one in an immaculate white tuxedo and the other in sharp black, prepared to make their public choice. Then the world plunged into a violent, chaotic darkness. A sudden power failure silenced the cameras and the crowd, turning the high-profile spectacle into a shadow-filled maze. In the sudden, suffocating suspense, I didn't scream. I reached out with a nothing-left-to-lose attitude. A firm, elegant hand seized mine in the shadows, not the heavy, gluttonous grip I had been dreading, but a touch of cold precision and absolute authority. "Now," a low, smooth baritone commanded. I let the stranger pull me from the cream luxury sofa, my fingers flying to grip his sleeve with a triumphant, shaking confidence. We moved through the darkness with a fluid grace that defied the terminal pressure of the moment. I was being mistakenly taken away, whisked away toward a waiting luxury vehicle while the ballroom erupted in confusion. As we breached the heavy doors and the cool night air hit my skin, I felt like the baddest woman alive. I was a ghost fleeing a monster, unaware that the king who had stolen me was Han Tae-jin, and that this mistaken exchange was about to turn my victory into a global scandal I never could have imagined. The ride to the private estate was a blur of high-speed turns and the muffled sound of rain lashing against the tinted glass. Inside the luxury vehicle, the air was thick with a charged intimacy and the scent of expensive sandalwood. The man beside me remained a monolith of practiced stillness, his silhouette sharp and unreadable in the dim emergency lighting of the car. I sat with my hands clasped tightly over the ornate gold embroidery of my gown, my breath hitching in the silent, electric cord of connection that stretched between us. I had escaped the monster, but the terminal pressure of the unknown was settling into my bones. When the vehicle finally hissed to a stop, I was guided through a private entrance into a penthouse that defined minimalist luxury. The space was a vibrant explosion of floor-to-ceiling glass and obsidian surfaces, overlooking a Seoul skyline that glittered like a scattered bag of diamonds. The heavy iron doors clicked shut behind us, with a sound of absolute finality. "We are safe here," the low, smooth baritone murmured. With trembling fingers, I finally reached up and pushed back the suffocating weight of the red silk veil. The fabric slid away, and for the first time, I looked directly into the intense, dark eyes of Han Tae-jin. The shock that registered on his face was a moment of genuine, unfeigned surprise. His mask of serene indifference shattered, replaced with an analytical intensity as he realized I wasn't the corporate heiress he was supposed to have rescued from the blackout. "You," he breathed, his voice vibrating with a fierce, primal need for clarity. "You aren't her." I stood my ground, my poised but burdened expression meeting his unreadable stare. "And you aren't Oh Sung-chul." The silence that followed was a shadow-filled maze. Tae-jin turned toward the wall of monitors in his study, where the news was already broadcasting the miracle of his wedding. The background wedding posters from the ballroom were being flashed across every screen, but the woman in the white suit's arms in the grainy footage was me. We were trapped in a mirrored high-end trap of our own making. The imbalance in the room shifted as the gravity of the mistake settled over us. To the world, I was now the wife of the nation's top CEO. To the underworld, I was a valuable asset stolen from a dangerous collector. Tae-jin ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of rare vulnerability. We were two strangers bound by a digital trail of public expectation, locked in a gilded penthouse where the only way out was to lean into the deception. The morning sun didn't just rise, it stabbed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse like an interrogation light. I stood before the vast wall of monitors in Han Tae-jin's study, watching as my own veiled mystery was dissected by every major news outlet in Seoul. The billion-dollar glitch had gone viral. Images of the man in the white suit whisking away a bride in crimson were looped in a vibrant explosion of breaking news banners. To the world, this was the romantic miracle of the century, the reclusive top CEO finally claiming his queen. To us, it was a mirrored high-end trap that was currently obliterating his company's valuation. "Look at the ticker," Tae-jin commanded, his voice a low, smooth baritone, vibrating with analytical intensity. At the bottom of the screen, the DH Industries stock was a chaotic maze of red. The market was reacting to the terminal pressure of uncertainty. The woman he was supposed to marry, a corporate heiress, was already issuing a scathing resignation from their unspoken agreement. Tae-jin stood as a monolith of practiced stillness, but I could see the fierce, primal need for control tightening his jaw. His absolute authority was being challenged by a mistake made in a shadow-filled maze of a blackout. "If I announce that I took the wrong woman, that I don't even know your name, the board will initiate a strategic duel to replace me by noon," he said, turning to face me. His intense, dark eyes searched my poised but burdened expression. "And the man you fled from, Oh Sung-chul, he is already claiming unwavering dedication to finding his stolen property. Without my protection, you are just a valuable asset waiting to be reclaimed by a monster." He stepped into my proximity, the minimalist luxury of the room suddenly feeling like a possessive cage. He wasn't offering a plea, he was presenting a calculated investigation of our only survival tactic. "I am proposing a 6-month contract," he murmured, the silent electric cord of connection between us tightening. "We maintain the union the world saw last night. I provide you with a rare sanctuary and the absolute authority of my name. In exchange, you help me stabilize the market and navigate the public scrutiny until the merger is finalized. You are no longer poor Nyla Brooks. You are the woman who saved an empire." I looked at the background wedding posters on the screen, then back at the man who was offering me a gilded penthouse as a shield. The power imbalance was staggering, but so was the dread-filled silence of the life I had left behind. I realized then that my victory in the dark had only been the beginning. To escape a monster, I had to marry a king, even if our miracle was nothing more than a calculated business strategy. The transition from a veiled mystery to a corporate ghost happened within the first 48 hours of my residency in the penthouse. While the world outside obsessed over the billion-dollar glitch, I found myself tucked away in the well-lit silence of the library, staring at the analytical intensity of Han Tae-jin's American market reports. It was a shadow-filled maze of missed cultural nuances and mediocre strategies that were hemorrhaging his company's capital. Tae-jin was a monolith of practiced stillness in the boardroom, but here, in the minimalist luxury of our shared solitude, he was a man struggling with a terminal pressure he wouldn't admit to. I began my work in secret, fueled by a nothing-left-to-lose attitude and the sharp, sophisticated understanding of branding that 6 years of swallowing my pride had sharpened. I didn't ask for permission. I simply began fixing the campaigns from a burner laptop, treating the task like a strategic duel against the very men who had once tried to make me invisible. I restructured the luxury brand expansion briefs, injecting a fresh perspective that bridged the gap between Seoul's clinical elegance and the vibrant explosion of American consumer culture. It was my unwavering dedication to a job I hadn't even been hired for, a way to prove that I was more than a valuable asset used to stabilize a stock price. One night, Tae-jin found me surrounded by strategy documents and half-empty cups of coffee. The absolute authority he usually carried seemed to soften as he looked at the fragment of evidence on the screen, a campaign I had overhauled that had suddenly begun to trend in New York. "You did this?" he asked, his voice a low, smooth baritone, vibrating with genuine, unfeigned surprise. "I told you I wasn't just a bride in a red shroud," my poised but burdened expression finally giving way to a spark of quiet strength. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, the power imbalance in the room didn't feel like a possessive cage. He saw the exceptional talent I had hidden behind a mask of indifference, and I saw the profound and aching loneliness of a king who had never had an equal. I was no longer his invisible asset. I was the miracle his empire didn't know it needed. The silent electric cord of connection between us tightened, no longer just a calculated business strategy, but the beginning of a partnership that could dismantle his fortress of success and build something real in its place. While I worked in the well-lit silence of the penthouse, the world outside was transforming into a shadow-filled maze. Oh Sung-chul was not a man who accepted loss. He was a jealous collector who viewed my escape as a scathing resignation from his personal property. From the dark corners of his own gilded estate, he began a calculated search, fueled by a gluttonous rage that no amount of wealth could sate. He didn't just want me back, he wanted to dismantle the miracle that Han Tae-jin had seemingly claimed in the dark. Sung-chul's underworld reach began to tighten like a velvet noose around the city. He didn't use the clinical precision of a CEO. He used the terminal pressure of a man who owned the streets. I watched from the safety of the minimalist luxury as the news reported fragmented evidence of a corporate war brewing. Private investigators, men with guarded stances and lethal readiness, were seen loitering near the DH Industries headquarters. They weren't looking for a corporate heiress, they were hunting for the striking Black American woman who had vanished into the vibrant explosion of a blackout. The paralyzing fear I had felt at the altar returned, a visceral memory that made the penthouse feel less like a rare sanctuary and more like a mirrored high-end trap. Every rhythmic thud of leather soles in the hallway made my breath hitch, wondering if the absolute authority of Tae-jin's security had finally been breached. Sung Chul was leaking scandalous rumors to the press, desperate to force a public scrutiny that would peel back my red shroud and reveal the truth of our mistaken exchange. Taejin found me staring at the monitors, my hand anchored protectively to the desk. He stood as a monolith of practiced stillness, his intense dark eyes reflecting the analytical intensity of the situation. "He's narrowing the search," I whispered, the silent electric cord of connection between us vibrating with suffocating suspense. "He is looking for a victim," he replied, his voice a low, smooth baritone that carried a fierce, primal need to protect. "He doesn't realize he is hunting a woman who is now part of my fortress of success. Let him search the shadows. He will only find that I don't believe in ghosts, and I don't give back what is mine." Despite his composed detachment, I saw the resolute fire in his gaze. The strategic duel between the top CEO and the jealous collector had begun, and I was the valuable asset at the heart of the flames. The minimalist luxury of the penthouse had begun to feel like a possessive cage, a gilded box where the air was thick with suffocating suspense. Sensing the terminal pressure rising within me, Han Tae-jin did something that defied his absolute authority. With a discreet gesture, he dismissed his security detail and his driver, trading the mirrored high-end trap of his luxury sedan for the anonymity of the Seoul night. He stood before me, his intense dark eyes softened by a rare sanctuary of intent. "Let's walk," he murmured, his low, smooth baritone cutting through the well-lit silence of the study. We stepped out into a part of the city where the vibrant explosion of neon dimmed into a shadow-filled maze of ancient stone walls and overhanging willow trees. For the first time since the red shroud of the wedding, I wasn't a valuable asset or a veiled mystery. I was simply a woman walking beside a man who had traded his mask of indifference for a quiet presence. We found ourselves in a hidden park, a coastal sanctuary of greenery tucked away from the public scrutiny of the main thoroughfares. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was a language of quiet, a digital intimacy that didn't require words or data. Tae-jin walked with a composed detachment that gradually melted, his rhythmic thud of leather soles slowing to match my pace. In this rare sanctuary, the power imbalance that defined our contract marriage seemed to vanish. I looked at his profile, no longer seeing the monolith of practiced stillness that commanded DH Industries, but a man who found profound and aching comfort in the simple act of being seen without a title. "In my world, everything is a strategic duel," he said, his voice a low baritone that blended with the rustle of leaves. "But here, with you, the fog clears." I reached out, my fingers grazing his sleeve in a discreet gesture of solidarity. The silent electric cord of connection between us tightened, no longer pulled by the underworld's reach or billion-dollar glitches, but by a genuine, unfeigned need for companionship. For one night, we weren't a mistaken exchange or a calculated business strategy. We were two souls finding a fragile bubble of hope in the heart of a city that never stopped hunting. As we turned back towards the fortress of success, I realized that the miracle wasn't the wedding. It was this, the moment the king decided he no longer wanted to walk alone. The fragile bubble of hope we had built in the gardens of Seoul shattered with the clinical coldness of a digital notification. We had barely stepped back into the minimalist luxury of the penthouse when Han Tae-jin's encrypted tablet flared to life, casting a harsh blue light across his serious features. A fragment of evidence, a single unauthorized data packet had been leaked from deep within the fortress of success. It wasn't just a corporate secret or a strategic brief. It was the final piece of the shadow-filled maze that Oh Sung-chul had been hunting for. My full name, my background, and the verified proof of the mistaken exchange were now in the hands of the monster I had fled. A breach. Han Taejin murmured, his low, smooth baritone vibrating with a lethal readiness I hadn't seen since the night of the blackout. The analytical intensity in his eyes turned into a resolute fire as he realized the terminal pressure of the situation. Someone within his own inner circle, perhaps a man of guarded stance he had trusted for years, had betrayed the absolute authority of the CEO for Sung Chul's gluttonous bribes. The rare sanctuary of the penthouse was no longer a shield, it was a target. My heart hammered against my ribs with the visceral memory of the altar, a paralyzing fear that the possessive cage was finally closing in. "He's already moving," he said, his rhythmic thud of leather soles echoing against the marble as he crossed to the wall of monitors. The digital trail showed a fleet of dark vehicles mobilizing across the city, their trajectory locked onto our location with the predatory intent of a calculated search. I stood in the center of the room, my hand anchored protectively to my chest, feeling the crushing weight of public scrutiny and private danger merging into one. I was no longer an invisible asset or a veiled mystery. I was a marked woman. The power imbalance of our contract marriage felt secondary to the fierce, primal need for survival that now bonded us. Taejin turned to me, his mask of serene indifference replaced by a profound and aching determination. "He thinks he can reclaim his property because he knows your name. He doesn't realize that by revealing who you are, he has only made it impossible for me to ever let you go." But as the sound of tires screeching echoed from the street below, I knew the strategic duel had turned into an all-out war. The underworld's reach was at the door, and the miracle we had started to believe in was about to be tested by fire. The clinical stillness of the penthouse was shattered by the rhythmic, violent thud of heavy boots breaching the private foyer. The mirrored high-end trap had been sprung. Oh Sung Chul's men, driven by a gluttonous rage and lethal readiness, surged into the minimalist luxury of the living room like a dark tide. Leading them was Sung Chul himself, his presence a terminal pressure that seemed to suck the oxygen from the air. He didn't look like a jilted groom. He looked like a jealous collector who had come to liquidate an asset that had dared to defy him. "Nyla," he barked, his voice a visceral memory of the altar that made my breath hitch. "Return what is mine, and perhaps I'll let Taejin keep his empire." I backed away toward the floor-to-ceiling glass, my hand anchored protectively to my chest. But I wasn't met with the coldness of a possessive cage. Instead, Han Taejin stepped in front of me, a monolith of practiced stillness transforming into a resolute fire. In that moment, he didn't reach for a phone to exert his absolute authority or call his board of directors. He abandoned the composed detachment of the top CEO and moved with a fierce, primal need that was purely, dangerously human. The vibrant explosion of violence was sudden and raw. Taejin engaged the intruders not with corporate strategy, but with a sophisticated understanding of combat that left me breathless. He was a secret guardian shielding his rare sanctuary from the underworld's reach. Every strike he landed was a scathing resignation from the man he used to be, the reclusive billionaire who never got his hands dirty. When Sung Chul lunged toward me, his hand outstretched to reclaim his property, Taejin intercepted him with a terminal force that sent the monster crashing into an obsidian pedestal. The empire was in flames. Furniture was shattered, and the minimalist luxury was stained with the grit of a strategic duel gone blood red. But Taejin didn't look at the damage. He turned to me, his intense dark eyes searching my face with genuine, unfeigned desperation. "Are you hurt?" he rasped, his low, smooth baritone cracking for the first time. The power imbalance was gone. The fortress of success was in ruins around us, but as he pulled me into the charged intimacy of his arms, I realized that he had destroyed his old life to save mine. We were no longer a calculated business strategy or a billion-dollar glitch. We were a fragile bubble of hope that had survived the fire, standing together in the wreckage of a possessive cage that could no longer hold us. The terminal pressure of the corporate war and the visceral shadow of Oh Sung-chul finally receded, leaving behind a resolute clarity that redefined the fortress of success. In the wake of the empire's flames, the truth of our mistaken exchange was no longer a fragment of evidence to be feared, but a foundation to be built upon. Han Tae-jin did not use his absolute authority to bury the scandal. Instead, he stepped into the light of public scrutiny with a composed detachment that had been transformed into a quiet presence. We stood before the board and the cameras not as a monolith and his valuable asset, but as chief partners in a new, sophisticated understanding of power. Settling the truth meant more than just legal documents or stabilizing the stock. It required us to navigate the shadow-filled maze of our own attachment issues. In the minimalist luxury of our new home, a space that felt like a rare sanctuary rather than a possessive cage, we addressed the traumas that had once held us back. Tae-jin worked through his obsessive intensity and the isolation of his reclusive mask, learning to trust in a partnership that didn't require a contract. I confronted my deep-seated fear of being made small, finding my voice not just as his strategist, but as a woman who commanded the space by her own right. The power imbalance that had defined our early days in Seoul vanished, replaced by a vibrant explosion of shared purpose. We were no longer hiding behind a red shroud or a billionaire's mask of indifference. Instead, we built an authentic life, one where our digital intimacy was grounded in the reality of morning coffee and late-night strategy sessions that felt like a strategic duel of equals. As we walked through the city that had once been a shadow-filled maze of terror, the onlooking crowd saw something far more compelling than a billion-dollar glitch. They saw a miracle of mutual respect. Tae-jin reached for my hand as we looked out over the Han River, his touch a discreet gesture of unwavering dedication. "I used to think I needed to own everything to be safe," he murmured, his low, smooth baritone vibrating with genuine, unfeigned warmth. "I've realized that the only thing worth having is a partner who can stand beside me in the fire." I looked at him, feeling the quiet strength of our union. We had survived the underworld's reach and the terminal pressure of our pasts. Now, as the sun set over a soul that finally felt like home, we weren't just a top CEO and a Black American lady caught in a scandal. We were the architects of our own destiny, standing together as true equals. If you felt something you can't quite name, that's what we do here. Subscribe.